How's it going, friends? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I played a training game last night. It was on Sunday night against QWBB, who was rated 1920 Rapid. I'm a little bit higher at 2079, and yeah, initially I'd record the game as I was doing it, although I didn't think the video went that great. Partly because it was surprisingly hard to get a 30-minute game in. There was a lot of waiting time, because apparently people just don't play long time controls online anymore. And I had this thing to where I was like, I had my chessboard set up, actually. So I was actually looking to the side for most of the video, looking at my chessboard, and then I'd go back. I thought that might be fine. I knew it's not the best setup, but I figured it's probably not worthy of publishing to YouTube. So what I am going to do for all you hardcore, I am going to post that to my Discord. So I'm going to post the full, live games. We'll have my raw reactions, moves and things like that, my thought process. That will be on my Discord. There will be a link in the description to join my Discord. Pretty chill community. We have some strong players, but we have players of all levels as well, which I think is most important. So yeah, so I just wanted to make this video to go over the game because I think it's very instructive for many reasons, as we will see here in a second. All right, so I was debating what move I wanted to play here because, as you all know, d4 is my bread and butter. But I've also been looking to some c4, knight f3, even b3 has been a move I'll play here and then in blitz. I decided to go knight f3. I thought it was the most flexible because, it stops e5, and I could still play d4, I could play c4, I could transpose sort of whatever I want. Then after d5, I decided to play pawn to c4 and see what he does. And then I believe on move 2, my opponent already made a mistake. My opponent played knight f6. Now, the thing about this is, when they play d5 and I play c4, if you know the traditional Queen's Gambit, d4, d5, c4, they either take or push or support the pawn with another pawn. Occasionally, you'll see a Chigorin, something like this. A line might go takes, queen takes, then knight f3, and then the queen could easily get attacked, and then you have an extra pawn in the center. These positions are normally better for you. You never, well, I say that. You shouldn't see a move like knight f6. And I say that because I do see it more than I would expect, which is positionally just a bad move, because after knight f6, I can take. Then if he plays queen takes, I play knight c3 to attack the queen, preparing e4 in the future. And if he plays knight takes, I just get e4 in for free. Technically, more accurate is knight f3 first, and then playing e4, because I think after e4, there's just some lines with, I want to say, e5, which kind of gets black back in the game. So that's normally, so as you'll see, after knight f3 and c4, knight f6, it basically transposes. So I was like, I could play d4 and just transpose to some traditional, Catalan structure or something like that, but let's just take. If queen takes, I'll play knight c3, then have all this flexibility with the pawns to maybe push them forward. And then if knight takes, which is what happened in the game, then I can play pawn to d4, and then e4 next, and we're basically going to transpose to what we looked at earlier. So, anywho, so I played d4, my opponent played bishop f5, which is actually, I believe, yes, it's the most accurate move in this position to stop e4. And I happen to know, let me just check the Explorer just to confirm. Yes, the theoretical move here is knight d2. Because if you really think about it, well, you still want to play e4, so how do we make that work? If we play knight c3, that gives them the option to potentially trade. Although computer's saying just e6 is fine. And I guess if e4, then you just lose a pawn after knight c3 and bishop e4. So, but even then, after knight c3, they could always take, and it's harder to make e4 work. So, and you don't really want to, you could just give up on your dreams, just play something like bishop g5 and e3 or something like that. The most accurate move here is knight d2. Knight d2 to prepare e4, forking the pieces. So here, my opponent played bishop g4, and here I'm out of book. I knew that knight d2 was the move, that was the extent of my knowledge. Here, apparently, knight e5 is very strong, but I didn't play that. I played e4 anyway. Knight b6. And then I just put my pieces on good squares. Bishop d3, g6. I castled, bishop g7, h3. So now that he has fianchettoed his bishop, and I pointed this out during the game, once he played g6, it made the possibility of h3 much stronger because he's not able to go bishop h5 because I would just trap the bishop, right? So I did castle first, just kind of waited a move, and then I played h3. And so he, in order to not lose material, he can't go back because I push. And if he just retreats, that's just sort of passive. So understandably, he took. I played knight takes. Now, there's one thing I had to see. It might look like, oh, there's a free pawn on d4 because the bishop and the queen are attacking, but the knight's protecting. So you only have one piece protecting. However, if you've done any, decent amount of Puzzle Rush, you'll notice that after bishop d4, you have a winning tactic with knight takes d4, winning a piece. Because if queen takes d4, then, the queen is gone. So we don't want to do that if we're black. Well, I mean, if I'm white, I'd love for my opponents to do that, but they did not play that, which is fine, because that means we get a competitive game. So my opponent castled, I played bishop e3, knight c6, and then here I was sort of, it started to come to the point where, okay, so now he's attacking the d4 pawn legitimately, and apparently I can play bishop e5 here, or bishop e2, but I played what I thought was the best move, which was d5, although it took some calculation. So if you go to my Discord and watch the raw footage, you'll see that I spent some time calculating this d5 and bishop takes b2 line, and the first line I looked at was if I just take the knight, he takes the rook, and I'm unable to take the bishop because my bishop hangs. And I saw this, although apparently I'm better after c takes b7, rook b8, bishop h6. Oh, there's a mate threat. Okay, well, that I didn't come that far, but, so if I had played that would have been fine. I just saw the hanging bishop and I was a little bit scared. However, after a couple of minutes of calculating, I realized that the pawn on b2 is untouchable, not for that reason, but for the simple reason I can play rook b1. And both pieces are attacked, and there's nothing he can do, so he's just going to drop a piece necessarily. So, and then, after d5, so I eliminate the option of bishop b2, and then I think, okay, what's he going to do with this knight? Subconsciously, you just dismiss knight b8. There's no way they just put their knight back on the original square. I think knight a5, even, it may not be as terrible as it seemed. Maybe I have like a b4, well, b4 hangs in exchange potentially, but I didn't really consider knight a5 either. I considered knight e5 and knight b4. And knight b4 was what I thought was the critical move, which is what he played. So, and if he goes knight e5, my plan was, what was I going to do? I think I was just going to take it easy for a move. I think I was going to take, and then just play a move like queen d2, protecting this guy, and the next turn I have f4, and then I can sort of harass the bishop. There's also sort of bishop h6 ideas if I want. White's doing just fine here. So after d5, he played what I thought was the critical move, which was knight b4. And I understood with him playing knight b4 that I would be surrendering my bishop pair. Because now he's more or less, as far as I can tell, threatening to take the pawn. So if I had played a move like bishop e2, now maybe computer's telling me he can't do that, because if takes, I play rook b1. If he goes like here, then I play queen c1. Okay, and then he's just going to lose a piece regardless. So, okay, so I guess the pawn is still pretty much untouchable, even if I just dropped the bishop back. But I saw this idea because I'm like, this bishop is a little bit of a pain. It's kind of a thorn because it's like, it's very powerful. When I played d5, I was opening the bishop up. So I'm like, let's just propose a bishop trade. Go bishop d4 here and trade bishops, which apparently here is a mistake. Now I'll admit, I didn't quite analyze these lines before hitting record. Like, I did a brief game review, but I don't explicitly remember why this was a mistake. And I was fine if he played knight takes d3. I was like, if he plays knight takes, I'll just play queen takes, and then I'm doing fine. I did realize that after bishop d4, he did trade. So after trades, knight takes, I was weary of the fact that my knight was undefended, and there was only a pawn preventing his queen from just taking it straight up. Not only that, but my knight's also kind of like, would be pinned to the bishop. So if my d-pawn got eliminated, then it could be a devastating blow to my position. Now, the moves I considered here when I was calculating this, I think I considered mainly e6 and e5. And knight takes d3, but obviously if knight takes, I just go queen takes. And we're doing fine. But I saw some variations. I was a little bit worried about e6, because I was like, okay, he plays e6. I can't take because he takes my knight, and sure, I can take the pawn with check, but it's just an extra pawn. We're down material, this is attacked, you know, this is not, you know, his f-file's open now, he's gonna double. This would not be a fun position, let alone just being down a piece. So then after knight takes d4, e6, I was thinking, well, what would I do in this position? And I'll be completely honest with you, I'm trying to remember my thoughts. So I had a variation, don't worry, I wasn't just gonna like wing it. I believe I was going to go... I'm trying not to look at the computer. I'm trying to remember. I think I was fine just sacking the pawn, if I'm being completely honest. I think maybe I was going to go a3, knight takes, queen takes, takes. Gosh, now I actually don't remember what my plan was. I'd have to go back to the video and look. I think I was also like, okay, if he plays e6, he's weakening his dark squares pretty badly, so I was like probably fine with him just doing it. Always possibly I just miscalculated something, if we're being completely honest. But anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. What happened happened, and I thought if he played e5, I would just be fine going like knight f3 or something. Because, you know, obviously en passant is legal, but despite what people tell you, en passant is not forced. So I can just play a move like knight f3, attacking the pawn, and then we're doing fine. And we'll play like a3 next. We'll see if he trades the knight or just retreats, and then, you know, we have a decent position. So the reason bishop d4 is a mistake is because of c6, apparently. Now, I think the more the computer thinks about it, the more it's just going to say equal rather than just better for black. Although, it's an uncomfortable equal. Because after c6, like, what do I do? c6 was a move I didn't consider. I probably would have just... yeah, this is a similar situation. Again, if I play, like, a3, he just trades d3 and then wins a pawn. So, I'm not exactly sure. So, definitely a mistake there, playing bishop d4. I did want to trade the dark square bishops, but... And I was aware that my knight was unprotected. I should have just gave that fact more deference. But, neither here nor there. He did not play e6. He did not play e5. He did not play c6. He did not take on d3. He played c5, which is a move I didn't quite see coming, but just like e5, I don't have to en passant. So I just retreated my knight. Then he took on d3. I played queen takes d3, and he went pawn to c4. And then I plopped my queen on e3. I was debating where to put my queen. And I thought my queen would just be most flexible on e3. It might look optically tempting to put the queen on d4 because you control all these dark squares, but the queen and the knight say the combination on the dark squares will not be that effective. My opponent could play f6 if he wanted to. Now, granted, I don't know if that's good of a move, but he would kind of shut down my attack. Whereas with queen e3, I have a pretty simple plan. I'm going to go queen h6, knight g5, and checkmate. And there's not a whole lot he can do to stop it. One sample variation is I thought maybe he would try to like reroute his knight to protect h7, but if he does that, then I would be able to go e5 and kick the knight away, and then if knight takes, I would just go knight g5 and it's game over. Right? So that's why I played queen e3. My opponent played queen d6. And when I first saw queen d6, I was a little confused. I was like, what does that do against my grand plan of queen h6, knight g5, just mating him? But then I realized he wants to go queen f6, queen g7. So kind of wrap around and then propose a queen trade if I were to go in. And I seriously thought about this move because I saw the concept of e5 taking away the f6 square from the queen. So I thought a bit about just playing e5 and sacking a pawn. Obviously, he'd have to take with the queen, although I didn't really consider knight takes, which would counterattack the queen. But if I were to take and he takes, I have this with tempo. But knight takes d5 is bad because of queen h6. And then once again, I just go in, which I think I would have found during the game. But I thought about queen takes, just playing like rook a d1, and then just playing this a pawn down, which I think is fine for me, it seems like. But you start to think, like, you're down a pawn, the attack is not very clear. If queen h6, there's f6 apparently, and I can just keep pressuring, but he can keep sort of cocooning. So I wasn't quite sure where this was going. Apparently, again, it's still like a little bit better for me, but even if I play like e6, he just goes queen g7. And then if I don't want to trade queens, I just go here, and I'm just down a pawn. That's how I saw it. I'm just down a pawn. So I did not play pawn to e5. I just decided to put more support on d5 first. So I played rook a to d1. My opponent played rook a to c8. And then I played e5. Because now d4 is protected. And I take away the f6 square. So after queen c5, obviously I'm not going to trade because we're on the attack and our goal is to make a V line for the king. So I played queen h6, and my opponent played what I believe is a forced move, which is f6. f6 is his only move to survive because otherwise I just play knight g5 and checkmate him. GG, bye-bye. Okay, so after queen h6, f6, I played knight d4 because when he played f6, I was like, okay, well, he stops the mate threat, but he now has a glaring weakness on e6. So I just play knight d4, which is apparently a mistake. Apparently rook d4 was way better, which makes sense because you just swing the rook over. Also, d6 is really good. d6 I considered. I don't remember why I didn't play it. I think I just thought that knight d4 was better. And after knight d4... it's saying that he can just play like rook f7, and if knight e6, he just goes like queen b5 or something, and I have no way through, which is absolutely crazy. What if I go d6 now? He just takes e5. Wow. And then if like d7, he just takes, and then my advantage is just gone, and I'm down 2 pawns. So, anywho, so after knight d4, he had not played rook f7. He played... actually, a move I give him a lot of credit for. He played queen takes d5. Now, if you watch the video, this is sort of the beginning of a insane calculation I had. It's insane because of the amount of moves, but also because of how blatantly inaccurate I calculated. In fact, I believe it was here. I'm trying to remember. I believe I calculated that before I played knight d4. So I'll show you the variation here. I'll play out the calculation without moving the pieces, and then you can laugh at me in the comments for my blatant miss. So the move, so I calculate knight d4, queen d5, knight f5, threatening mate, queen f7, forced, which stops mate, and then I calculate pawn to e6, which is a clutch move, queen g7, queen takes g7, king takes g7, knight takes e7, check, king h8, knight takes c8, then I win in exchange. And I'm pretty sure that's on the video, and I'm pretty sure I was as convinced as I am about, like, Christianity, that that was an accurate variation and that it was completely flawless. Well, here am I to tell you, there were probably 3 or 4 errors in that calculation. So the line itself was actually good. The line with knight d4, queen d5, knight f5, then this e6 move, e6 especially is clutch. And I'm glad that I saw that during my calculations, because it would have been easy to just see, oh, the queen goes to f7, it's going to go to g7, and then I've kind of missed, well, actually not queen g7, he's going to take the knight and then go queen g7, and then my opportunity is missed. I'd be down a piece. But I'm going to show you the variation one more time, so if you don't want to see it, just skip ahead to a part where I start moving pieces. Knight d4, queen d5, knight f5, queen f7, e6, queen g7, queen takes g7, king takes g7, knight takes e7, check, king h8, knight takes c8. All right, so let's go over. There are a couple things I thought were inaccurate. So I do the calculation, and then I realize. So I'm like, okay, At some point, I'm like, knight d4, queen d5, knight f5, queen f7, e6, queen g7, queen takes g7, king takes g7. Oh, the king's on g7. So when I take on e7, it's no longer check. But that's fine. I can just like win a pawn, attack his rook. I have a passed e6 pawn. That's all good. But then, once I reviewed the game and actually was able to put pieces on the board, I put this through. So I played knight d4. He played queen takes d5, knight f5. Now here he sacked the queen, which is going to be its own thing, but I'll show the variation first. Queen f7, e6, as you see, is completely winning. And I saw queen g7 with the idea to trade queens. But then queen takes g7 is just checkmate. I still have a knight on f5. Not only that, but my knight on f5 would have taken on e7. So in theory, I should have just seen this sort of concoction of pieces. So I was a little bit embarrassed when I realized this. But that's fine. Then we can make a clickbait thumbnail. We'll make it like Horrendus Miscalculation or something like that. And a picture of me like doing this or something like that. I think I'm just going to pose for the thumbnail for a second. All right. So, anywho. So, again, it was a good line. E6 is a killer move, but it's just that I incorrectly misevaluated it. Sorry, phone is going totally crazy. Just one of those things, I guess. Being in group chats and such like that. Okay, so I play knight d4, and then he sacks the queen, which I actually respect, because now material's equal, and it's hard for me to break through. I have a queen, I have a pawn, and I have like a rook to work with, basically. And he has a whole defensive sort of setup. So I play rook d1, he plays pawn to e6, and here I should just play a move like g4, and then just try to like make progress, like maybe g4, g5, and put my h pawn in or something like that. I knew during the game that this was probably not accurate. I thought it gave me decent winning chances. I just sacked the exchange. I sacked the exchange with the idea to go e takes f6. And now this is scary looking. I am threatening queen g7 mate. I have a pawn sort of as a thorn on his side. He plays rook c7, which apparently rook f7 is a little bit more accurate, but that's fine. And so my plan, when I initially saw this, like it wasn't just to threaten mate in one. You know, when you play chess, and especially if you sacrifice, you shouldn't just sacrifice material to threaten mate in one. That shouldn't be your basis. So my plan, I saw this position, or this type of position. My plan was to go g4, g5, h4, h5. Oh, my arrows went away. That's fun. g4, g5, h4, h5, g6, and completely wreck his king side. That was my plan. Well, what do you think is wrong with the plan? Well, one, you'll notice that I made a ton of moves for myself, and I didn't consider my opponent's resources. And I realized on this move that if I just go for my plan, just pushing my pawns down the board and bullying him, he has a passed pawn that he can run down the board as well. And then started to dawn on me, I would just not be in time, because I need 1, 2, 3, 4, I need like 5, maybe 6 moves for my plan to come into effect. He needs what? 1, 2, 3, 4. He needs 4 moves. And you might be thinking, oh, well, the queen just covers the d2 square, so the pawn won't be able to go. Well, when I put my pawn on g5, I block the queen's access. I block the queen's access, so I would be trapping my own queen. So I go g4, so let's say he goes d4, here, here, and then here, I have a bailout with like queen g4 apparently, but if I were just to go all in, he's just completely winning. And obviously, I'm just way too slow. Like, it might look good with a queen and like 3 pawns right near the king, but he has a pawn soon to be queen, and I am toast. So thankfully, I had the self-awareness. I noticed that, so I was like, okay, I made a mistake. That's fine. Let's just go check, pick up a pawn, and then attack this guy. So I would check, took, and then took this guy. And then I got this position. And then I took here, and then he took f2. I played queen d4, which, you know, I'm threatening to win the rook, but he just plays rook f6. So here's the situation. I have a queen for 2 rooks, and I have an extra pawn. So it's equal material, because 2 rooks is better than a queen by 1 point, but 4 pawns is better than 3. So it's super imbalanced, although I do take on a7 next. Actually, so that changes things a little bit, because now I'm just up a pawn, or up the equivalent of a pawn. So I have 4 pawns versus 2, and queen versus 2 rooks. So this should be winning for me, but it'll take some technicality. And I'm not really afraid of him checking me, because I can just hide. And his rooks, like, even if he's able to get the combination, something like this, I'm just going to make some waiting moves. Even if he gets like this going, these checks don't scare me, because they can't really coordinate well together. I mean, here he hangs the rook, but even if it doesn't hang the rook, I can just move my king, and, I mean, you know, maybe, I mean, if he ever tries to get, like, a perpetual, then I can always just sack my queen for the 2 rooks, and then I win the endgame. So, anyway, so I'm not afraid of those 2 rooks. He played rook f7. I played b4, because then I'm like, okay, well, I have a majority here. I also have a majority on the king side, but he has, like, all his pieces on the king side, so there's really no point in playing to that. So I'm going to play b4, b5, a4, a5, a6, just create a passed pawn on the queen side. If I can create a passed pawn on the queen side, I should just be winning. He plays h5, which scared me a little bit, because now I'm like, if I just continue, I was thinking he could play h4, and then my king wouldn't be able to get out in some situations. Although here, apparently, I'm just still winning. I guess queen d4 just goes after the pawn. Here's what I played here. I played queen d4, stopping the pawn from going to h4. He plays king h7. I play queen to h4. And then here, he finally cracked. He played king h6. He played king to h6, which the pawn is still pinned. But also note that the rook and king are placed in a fork situation. So I play g4. I play g4, and my opponent is suddenly in trouble, because now I'm just threatening to straight up win a 3rd pawn. So I'll be up 3 pawns for the queen and the rook. The queen and the 2 rooks. Not to mention, I'm just going to play g5 and fork his pieces. So he plays, his best move is apparently just king g7, just giving up the pawn. And then, yeah, I can take it. And it would still, there would still be some technicality, but I'd say on a human level, this is very easily winning. So he played rook f1, and then he played rook to f2, which he didn't have to do. He could just play like king g7, then try to hold, but he plays rook f2 probably out of frustration, and I just trade the queen for the 2 rooks. He takes, I go here, and then this is completely winning. I'm up 3 pawns in the pawning game. Like, yes, he can freeze my pawns, but, you know, if these were the only pieces on the board, it would be a draw, because at the end, he can just go back and then get stalemate. If you don't know these endgames, then just be better. I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, I decided to win by just walking my king to the other side, and then I just pushed my pawns, and then that is that. Game over. Red Rover, I won. So I thought it was a pretty good game. I thought that was instructive for a number of reasons. I think sort of the opening advantage is very instructive in how I was able to convert upon that, but also mistakes, and then just things about planning, anticipating your opponent's resources, miscalculations. I thought that was an overall instructive game. So if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, feel free to join my Discord if you are so inclined, and I will see you for the next video. Also, my next video will probably be a tournament recap, because I have a tournament coming up, probably at the time you're watching this, it'll be tomorrow. I have a tournament on Wednesday evening. it'll be a very strong tournament. So if you want some behind the scenes, that's like my preparation and what I'm doing, you know, to prepare. That was the most redundant sentence in the world. But if you want some behind the scenes, basically on how I'm feeling about it, join the Discord. All right. I'll see you guys. Have a good one. Bye.